Welcome to the Putting Couch, presented by the SeeMore Putter Company's tour team. I'm Jim, along here with Cody Hale, Ted Galena, and this is Season 2, Episode 23. And we're going to talk a lot about fitting because it seems like the world is very, very quickly moving towards one where putter fitting has become something that is not just a nice to have, but a must have. And that's a fantastic thing, because for years we have lamented the fact that too many golfers were willing to just go out and put that 14th club in their bag, the putter, by just grabbing it off of a rack. And, you know, it's fine if they've done their research and they've done some online studying, or they've used one before and they go in and they fulfill it by buying one. I mean, we're not discouraging that. But if you do get the opportunity to get fit for a putter, and particularly in our case, we have a really extensive network of instructors and fitters as part of the SeeMore Putter Company that we could refer you to, that we think are very, very well trained and can really help the golfer not just find the right putter, but actually understand what makes a great putting stroke and what makes a lasting putting stroke. So with that, I'd like to jump right into kind of a conversation with Cody Hale. He is SeeMore's tour director and also runs our studio here in Franklin, Tennessee, where he is regularly working with players from the tours and avid golfers that some of them take their time and come a long ways to see you, Cody. They
do, and it's sort of encouraging to see, because putting has always been that last part that they sort of focus on, right? You're starting to see more people go get fit for their irons and driver, and then now obviously the putter, but usually it's the last piece of the puzzle that they're being fit for. And believe it or not, I've actually had a few that have come in the last probably month and a half that they're planning a resurgence in their game, and the putter is the first place they're starting, and with it being nearly 40% or hopefully not more, of their strokes that they're using that club, it can be one of the most important parts, and could be the part of the game that they improve the quickest. Hey, it's an easy way to cut 2 to 3 shots out if we can help you and gives you a game plan to head in the right direction.
No question about that. And, and this is golfers of all skill levels, because it's not just great players that can benefit from better putting, but really the average club level player, even recreational player playing at, municipal golf courses, playing here and there. Putting can be a lot more fun than it might be for you right now when you actually take some time to understand the fundamentals and how you can improve your putting. So I know it was really cool. We've recently had several players who we would call them mini tour players, right? They're aspiring to play in the PGA Tour at some point in time. And there's a whole lot of levels before that. And Cody, I know as a tour player, you went through those. And they'll pick up the phone and call us from Florida and Arizona, California. And, hey, I'm going to be in Nashville, or, hey, how long does it take to get from Florida to Nashville? I'm going to jump in my car. I'd like to come up and hang out with you guys for a day. We've seen that more and more, where they invest 2 days of their time and a lot of gas and a lot of windshield time to come up and spend time with you, Cody. And it's rewarding. I know one of those 2 guys that came in the offseason had some real good success last year in some one-days and earned his way onto the Latin America Tour. And he played in his very first event on the PGA Tour. It was PGA Tour Latin America. And he shot 16 under in the first tournament. In fact, was leading the tournament late in the day on Saturday. Said he felt some nerves and some pressure on Sunday, so he didn't get the job done. But he told us it was a personal best, 16 under. He beat his prior best by 8 shots, Cody. And a lot of that had to do with putting, because he's been in regular contact with us since you've started talking to him.
Yeah, no question. And it's just paid off. He's been progressively getting better, and I think even though he may not have had the Sunday finish he was hoping for, I think he saw the progress that he's making. And a lot of times with those players at that level, even with any of us, right, it's a process to getting better and sort of sticking to some key sort of fundamentals or whatever methodology you're adopting, is really having a process to stick to. And that's where you're going to see the progression and getting better and better. If you're constantly changing or switching, it's really hard to develop any kind of consistency. And I think that's one thing he's starting to see, is that he's starting to put together a process, and it's starting to pay off for him.
So Cody, it feels to me like there is sort of a 3 or 4 point plan to become a great putter, and when you work with somebody, I mean, a lot of times it'll be sort of starting with where they are now and what they want to get out of it. And then you get them fit, for the right putter and maybe sometimes the right stroke, right? And then, as you mentioned, after that, it's really about belief and confidence and sticking to it, because nothing is going to be a straight line progression. You're going to have bumps in the road, but if they stick with it, and I know that's one of the things why when somebody does get fit with us or one of our certified instructors, I mean, we never say that it's a one-step process. We want you to begin it, get a putter, get a putting stroke that you feel comfortable with, and then just like your golf swing. I mean, it's going to take a while, and it's going to take some tune-ups.
Correct. It's not a Band-Aid fix. It's we're looking for long-term consistency, and how can we create a plan to get there? Is it through just getting you fit for the proper putter and the length and lie, or is it a whole, practice plan? How are you, going out, warming up? How are you, practicing when you're able to practice? And, what components are that we need to create a game plan for to get you better? And I think in, some of the sessions we have in here, it's really understanding what those tendencies are, what your goals are, how much time are you going to put into it, and then understanding how important setup and putter length and lying on loft and those things are to really achieving some of those goals, and being more consistent under pressure. And that's when it means the most, right? Is when you go play and you put yourself under a little bit of pressure. Is that going to work out, and is it going to perform for you?
So real life case study, because I think a lot of our listeners are going to want to sort of put themselves into this situation. But I know yesterday you had a couple of golf pros, teaching pros, fitting pros, come in here and kind of want to go through the entire process. And of course, as instructors, Ted, you're an instructor. You've talked a lot about your days as a PGA Tour director of instruction, but you're not just an instructor, you're a student as well. So you want to learn everything you can, and it starts with your own putting stroke. So what is some of the, how did this session start yesterday, Cody? What were some of their questions and some of the areas that they wanted to address for themselves, and then how did you then carry forward with that?
Yeah, and I think as a instructor, you're looking at, one, how can this help me, and then how can it help my students? And that's sort of what we were talking about yesterday with both of these gentlemen that came in. And it was about the one gentleman who's a good player. I knew he was a good player, but always looking to get a little bit better. He may have assessed himself a little difficult. Man, he
graded tough on himself.
Yeah, he did. He really did. And he's a good putter anyway for, most standards. But he's looking to get a little bit better and a little bit more consistent. He was just talking about some of the tendencies. So we actually walked through a few things and a few ideas in terms of starting with a setup and what he's trying to accomplish, what he's doing in a setup, why is he doing that, what he feels like when he aims the ball, why is he using the line on the ball, and what his perception is. And so we actually had him in. We jumped on Sam Putt Lab to actually just put a few numbers together.
And he brings his own putter in, right? You always want somebody to start with their own putter, right?
I think it gives you a good baseline for what they're what they're doing and what they're using with that particular option. Sometimes if you come in with no preconceived notions, then it's great. I mean, we can start and we can create our own baseline. But for him, he sort of already had this. He's been using the putter for a while. So we were looking at a few things, and while his numbers look good, there's a few things we started to look at in terms of where he's striking the ball in the face. Even though he's getting his face back to square, he's not really striking it in the center of the putter sometimes. And some path sort of issues that we're seeing. His aim was good. So what we really talked about in this session is, one is his setup and some of the things in his setup that may be controlling the path. So he had sort of a little loop in his transition, meaning from backstroke to follow through. It wasn't really all on one plane. So his backstroke sort of looped, and it sort of tried to stabilize, which could cause some of his tendencies, his missed tendencies that he was talking about. Well, his numbers were pretty good on when we measured him. That's what he's feeling and seeing on the golf course. And so you can't really discount what a player feels under pressure. And so you got to sort of take that into account. And one thing we sort of realize is when he sets up with that particular setup and length, he sort of has more of his weight on his heels than he needs to. And so generally you see that with sometimes players get in a longer putter in order to sort of stabilize. They move their body back and sort of to be able to account for the length that they have. And what it does is it starts to create path issues, so they're not as sort of stable in their foundation. And so we looked and sort of took an assessment of that and tried to figure out a way where, was it a length or was it a simple posture adjustment? So we didn't want to change his perception. So we just went in and looked at a few things with the length to try to get him in a more balanced setup position. And that was one of the sort of starting points we look at as sort of your current setup and how is that performing? And do we need to make any adjustments from there?
And how about in terms of the putter design or the style that he had? Is it something that he's always been married to something close to that? Or does he, is he somebody that's gone back and forth from blades to mallets? And did he end up, did that type of putter end up being the best for him, or did he learn some things?
So what we looked at in that scenario is he'd always used something similar to that. He's liked different putters, but he's always seen more success with that particular style. And so we actually, through just looking at those options, we actually stayed in a fairly similar style just because of how well he's sort of performing with that. It may be that, if he's making a few adjustments, it may be something that we look at a little different design going forward. But we looked at a lot of stuff with ball position and just tried to create a foundation for him to look at, like, hey, you're pretty efficient here. He didn't know that's exactly where he was, but we set some parameters to keep an eye on so that he could sort of manage that. And he's, being efficient with that style. I think he's sort of built his style of putting around that.
One thing I always applaud instructors and golf professionals wanting to learn more about putting, because a lot of golf professionals can take the easy way out to their students or to their members and say, just do what feels right. So having these two gentlemen come over and taking time out of their day to learn more about putting, that they see the big picture. They see how they can not only improve themselves in their own putting habits, but also how they can now be more informed when a member walks in and says they need help with their putting. They're more rounded as a golf instructor and a golf professional. And then 3, selfishly, they end up selling more SeeMore putters and they give more SeeMore lessons. So anytime a golf instructor reaches out to us by phone or email or in person, not many golf professionals do that. So when you do find an SPI instructor in your area, that person, he or she, is someone I believe is very special. Take the time out to learn more about putting, that not only can help them out, but also improve, your stroke at the same time.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, Ted, because we know from analytics now that, and from a lot of people reaching out to us, that our listener base for the Putting Couch really consists of golfers of all skill levels and a lot of professional fitters and a lot of instructors around the world, because again, that's all we talk about is sort of all things putting, and so we all have a shared passion and we come at it from different angles. So, and as you said, Ted, I mean, these are instructors. They want to stay one step ahead, and the one thing that we do find is that a lot of ultimately a lot of the instructors and fitters and students realize that SeeMore's come a long way, since the original FGP that Payne Stewart used to win the U.S. Open in 1999. Still probably the greatest putting performance in the history of major championships, and Zach Johnson's 2 major championships. And there's a thought that they have about what those SeeMore putters looked like, and they were very unique and straight shaft and near center and blades. But at this point in time, SeeMore really has a putter shape and design really that matches any golfer's need or style. And so in the end of the day, you can put anybody through a fitting, and then the fact that it's got rifle scope technology on it just allows the golfer that one extra checkpoint to make sure that they're set up in the same place and that they're square. And I know yesterday I did hear you talking about that with these 2
Correct.
Golf professionals.
And that was one of the styles that we ended up going with what you mentioned, one of the new styles that sort of, again, with him and his visuals, it's sort of hard to say, hey, look, you need to go a different direction when you're having, that level of commitment and really success in terms of what we're looking for. But that's it, is this was not only going to give him, one of the things we did talk about with him too is the lie angle. So he was always messing with his hands to try to accommodate for what the putter was doing. And this way we could go in and sort of give him we looked at the numbers, we confirmed a few setup things, but we could also make some adjustments to the lie angle in order to work with his hand position, make sure that was in the proper spot where he didn't have to make any last minute adjustments. And then also it gave him a system to be able to understand, because it's easy to be able to, in a controlled environment or with any kind of training aids down, to sort of reinforce consistency. But when you go to the golf course, how are you going to do that? And that's where I think the red dot and the white lines on this particular option is going to give him a little bit more confidence in knowing that I'm controlling the loft, I'm controlling the shaft position, I'm controlling the aim. And so that was one of the big sort of keys with sort of him is that we've got a process.
And I know we've talked a lot about, the arc versus straight back and straight through. And we've got a lot of different ways we've talked about how to sort of show somebody that in actuality, since you're standing to the side of the ball, at some point, every stroke has to have some arc in it. And, what were his thoughts yesterday about, you mentioned that he was fighting just a touch of a loop, and maybe he even felt that. But in general, you said he was a very good putter. What made him a good putter in terms of, was it as the tempo of the stroke, the length of the backstroke to the through stroke, the arc? Tell us a little bit about what you found there.
I think it's a combination of sort of all of those, right? His path is very consistent and pretty neutral, right? So generally what we see for a lot of guys is, if you can keep it, again, you've got to be able to measure this, but within sort of a 2-degree window, meaning out to in or in to out, then most of the time it's a lot easier to control the face at impact, right? If you're cutting across it and you've got, your setup's really open and you can't really, you don't really have a lot of face awareness, then it's sort of tough to control the face at impact, right? The low point of the stroke. So what we did with him is he was sort of consistent in, really 3 main key areas. One is how well he aimed it. It was really good. 2 is he was really consistent with the face at impact. And 3, he has a really consistent putting stroke. And it repeats over and over. But the one thing, that's why I was asking him, is what's your tendency on the golf course? And he kept saying, I hate a left miss. I just fight a left miss. And that's where we can see some of that is when he actually took it he's got contour to his stroke, right? He's got a little bit of an arc, right? But the putter works a little too far in and then loops sort of back online. And then that's where he sort of catches some of the putts when it starts moving back left. He catches them a little bit off the toe. Maybe the face shuts down a little too quick. And so that's what we were talking about with this setup. So, and that's so important, as the length can dictate that. As if you're too long, you may be too far from the golf ball. Your weight may not be in the right position. Too short, you may be too far on your toes. Too much tilt, too far out over the ball. And so, trying to create that stable environment first is really where we see. Benchmark it with the tour players. We see a really consistent base, and then from there we can do a lot of things. But a lot of it, so much of it starts in setup positions and trying to get the same distance from the golf ball and execute that at a high level, and then we can move on. And with him, like you mentioned, tempo is a big thing. And so a lot of times we do have to have that conversation of tempo, and you hear it a lot, straight back, straight through. And it's, while people, I think they may understand the putter has to move on a slide arc, they still think straight back, straight through is a terminology that they don't understand, that the putter head shouldn't move straight back, straight through.
Right.
The shaft is okay to move on one plane, but the putter head shouldn't. And so I always use I think most people are visual learners. So if you took a glass plane or, a window, right, and you stood it up and you moved your putter and you're tilted, it'd be really hard to keep it sliding on that. But if I took that door, that glass plane, and I tilted it and took the putter toe and moved it along that, it'd be a lot easier to keep it on that. So that's where that sweet spot of the putter actually moves on a consistent sort of natural arc. And depending on distance from the golf ball and shaft position, it's going to create maybe more of an arc or less. But it's got to have a little bit of rise and rotation, unless you're really going to manipulate the heck out of the putter. And then the second side of that is tempo. And I think most great putters, that from our analysis over the last 10 to 15 years, watching tour players, watching people perform and hit putts consistently and judge the speed, most putters that, especially with the agronomy now, greens get quicker, have a longer backstroke or equal backstroke to follow through. And it's easier to control the tempo. And why should we do that? Well, if you have a short backstroke, let's say you have a 10% backstroke and 90% follow through of a total length. If you have a lot of acceleration, the putter speed around that fluctuates. So it might, as soon as you get to impact, at the point of where it's striking the ball, the speed may be completely different from putt to putt. When you have a longer backstroke, it's a lot smoother, so that speed stays more consistent through the downstroke, through the ball, so it's easier to judge the speed at which the putter hits the ball. Therefore, distance control becomes so much easier. So that's a conversation we have a lot in fittings, is that because that can help your timing and how well you square the face. Because if you get real quick, the face is constantly changing, so you may miss it right one time, and then the old next miss is the old flip, and the toe shuts down too quick. So a lot of times we can help with tempo and also help with face awareness at impact. So, to me, most people can improve by having a little longer backstroke than they typically have, and it'll smooth out that tempo. Had a gentleman in here the other day, and he was sort of, I got to accelerate through it. Well, why? Well, I feel like I'm decelerating in the face play. Well, we sort of talked about that, and I just said, just try it. Just take it out of the golf course, try it. Hit some putts before you go. He literally walked in the next day, which was yesterday, walked in and said, man, I putted the best I have in probably a year. He said the guys were wondering in my group, wondering what was going on. And it was just that, he judged speed better. He said his, longer putts were, much more consistent. And to be honest, we don't talk enough about speed control inside 10 feet, because I think that's where you start making the hole bigger. It's where people are going to make more putts, is that speed control at 6, 8, 10 feet is equally as important.
So there you have a situation where I think it's almost a derivative, again, of that myth of straight back and straight through. Because I think a lot of people, when they hear that term and then they apply it themselves, what they're really thinking is that, straight back and straight through, I think what they think in their mind is that, I putt with a square face, and it's two totally different things, right? Because the straight back and straight through stroke means that you're going to actually be bringing the putter back on a straight line and through on a straight line, which means you've got all this manipulation. But I think one of the reasons the term is so misapplied is it does sound like, of course I try and putt straight back and straight through, if you're equating that to I try and putt with a square face, and I think that's the issue. And the problem then is that if that's what you think you need to do, you are afraid to bring it back very far, because you realize very quickly you can't bring it back on a straight line. And so that's why they bring it back a couple of inches and they just try to hit it.
Just pop it through. And and that's where you see the players that have a really long follow through, really short backstroke, and they accelerate, and then they have this long follow through. And it's just, that's why their speed is short, long, short, long, short, long. And it's just tough to, one, control the face, and two, control the tempo. And the most of the players that I see that have that mentality, because I always do ask them, is like, what do you feel like powers your stroke? What do you feel like, how are you trying to move the putter? And a lot of them, I putt straight back, straight through. Well, we look at them, we sit, you don't have to have technology to be able to stand behind them and look. And as soon as they take it back, they take it directly outside. And I can't tell you how many players I've seen with reasonably good setup that have the mentality, are you moving the shaft straight back? Are you moving the putter head? What do you feel like you're doing? I'm moving the putter head back, and I'm trying. So they take it directly outside, and then they have to manipulate it back. And so one of the things we found is like, look, that may be more of a mental barrier that we have to get through. And so I've seen them a lot of times where, like, just don't even think about your path. Let your setup sort of control it. And we'll see it, and then we'll actually measure it, and it'll change instantly. But just because they're not trying to move the putter that way, and then when they just, let the putter head swing, it's amazing how much more fluid and efficient that their actual stroke path becomes.
I need to book an appointment with Cody. What I'm taking away from this is that really all of us, it's fantastic, and so many of us. Because it seems any of us can grab a putter and start knocking balls occasionally into a hole, right? But working with somebody like Cody, or one of the many, many fitters and instructors that he's certified around the country, or other people that haven't yet come to SeeMore, but if they've put a focus on putter fitting, go and see him. And because I think there's so many little things that you just don't think of yourself that are out there for rapid improvement.
Well, and then also he makes it sound so simple and relatable that it's not. You don't walk out of here going, "What in the world did he just tell me?" You walk out of here with something tangible that you can work on. It makes sense. I understand it. And I know we say this all the time, but it's simply reinforced by a little thing on the back of the putter, the red dot and 2 white lines.
I think that's the biggest thing.
That
right?
is, and people don't understand that everything Cody has talked about in the last 25 minutes is reinforced with the red dot and 2 white lines. You can take any practice training tool. We have lots of them here that are fantastic, but can you take that practice to the course, like what Cody says? You're under pressure and you need some type of reinforcement, and doggone it, there it is, the red dot and the white lines, and whew, you're nice and relaxed. I mean, if people, and our SeeMoreans, they see it and they get it, and they're the ones that are going out there, you need to use this putter. If you're not using this putter, then I don't know what's going on. That's fine. You putt the way you want to and keep on complaining to me. I'm fine.
And no question, we're getting great referrals through this network of mini tour players and college players who they've done it, they've experienced it, and they realize, hey, what a great investment of time and money to do something like this. And Ted, I know you're downplaying your own role in this because twice you've taken our good friend Russell Knox and shown him the simplicity of the SeeMore putter, and within weeks he's won twice on tour. Again, this is over the course of a long time. These guys are unbelievable players. They have a lot on their mind. Every week it's a different club they're focused on. But that one time that, he has been able to sit there and focus with you on the putter, the stroke, and not just Russell, but he comes to mind because he's a great friend of the company. And, he's not always using a SeeMore putter, but it's kind of always close by so that he can go back to those fundamentals. And I think he's representative of a lot of players at all levels. So I know we wanted to keep this kind of short and sweet because we also want to remind our listeners and anybody that's new that these podcasts, the Putting Couch, are evergreen. So every one that we've done up until this one, which is episode 23, has some value. And they're sort of, they all cover different things. We cover the mental game. We cover tour fittings. We cover equipment. We've done some interviews with tour players. And one of the things, Ted, we've done this year now is we've also created a new site where somebody can go, I think it's puttingyou.com, where we will house the putting couches, and we'll also house some videos and some other things that we refer to in these episodes so that golfers can go and really consume more than just this one episode.
Every time we post one of these and we put them out on the interweb, I mean, you can subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify. All these are on there. But if you want more details and categorize, go to puttingyou.com. One, we got great videos up there for you to watch, to learn more about. But then also you can click the podcast/articles tab, and we've got them broken down into general discussion, industry newsmakers, mental game with Dr. Bob, putting instruction tips from Pat O'Brien. So they're very easily categorized. You can click on them and listen to whatever, one day you want to listen to the industry newsmakers. We've got 4 of them there. So it's an easy way for you, the listener, to go and just quickly listen to our podcast.
That's fantastic. And I think one of the other cool things is I know Cody talked about the concept today of sort of the tilted plane, the tilted glass, and kind of helping golfers really understand visually this dichotomy between straight back and straight through in the arc. And I know one of the great tools that we've come across is the putting board, and we're actually going to start distributing this product worldwide because we had one in our booth at the PGA show, and there was an unbelievable interest in it. And the guys that created it, Sam and Pat, are great friends of ours, and so that is one thing to look for. And I know if you go to the Putting You, and if you go, we'll make sure that the video is posted of that putting board because it will help you to understand the great putting strokes of almost every player, how they do arc, but how they could also be considered in another way to be straight back. So the shaft is on a straight plane, the head rotates on an arc.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic execution of a training aid. It's a plane board. You've got a clip that slides on it, and it really allows you to feel how the putter head should work, especially if you're you want to putt on one plane, you want to putt neutral. your face stays square to the path. It's just a great way to be able to sort of practice your stroke, practice how to control the face, and also control your stroke length. I mean, there's so many nice visuals on there that allow you to control what we're talking about, your stroke length being whatever for round math, being 50% back, 50% through. You can sort of get an idea of the proper stroke length, the proper stroke, and what that's going to feel like through this training. It's cool.
And for season 2, one of the new commitments is that we're going to bring on people like Pat and Sam and other really great professionals in the industry who've contributed so greatly and who also have a passion for helping golfers putt better. So anyway, I think that's about it for this episode. Season 2, episode 23. You've been listening to The Putting Couch, presented by the SeeMore Putter Company's tour team. I'm Jim Grunberg, along with Cody Hale and Ted Galena. We'll catch you next time.
We appreciate you joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the show, make sure you do wherever you're listening. Be sure to leave a rating and review because that's how we get the Putting Couch podcast content in front of more people. Also, take a screenshot and share it on social media and tag us at SeeMore Putters or hashtag Team SeeMore.